Trump's spending freeze sets up a future possible Supreme Court showdown over presidential power. President Donald Trump's dramatic pause of federal grants and loans is queuing up a Supreme Court showdown over the Constitution that will test the court's recently muscular commitment to curb executive power. Although the 6-3 conservative court has often sided with Trump, most notably granting him sweeping immunity from prosecution in July, the justices have also been engaged in a years-long project of limiting the president's ability to exercise powers usually wielded by Congress. Former President Joe Biden was often on the losing end of those fights, and now the question is whether the trend will continue under Trump. An internal White House memo, circulated Monday, ordered federal agencies to temporarily pause federal grants and loans beginning Tuesday evening, freezing potentially trillions of dollars and affecting millions of Americans. A federal judge in Washington on Tuesday temporarily blocked the administration's plans to freeze funding for open awards already granted by the federal government. There's every reason to think that, unless this memo is quickly rescinded, the litigation it is going to provoke will get to the Supreme Court in one big hurry, said Steve Vladek, CNN Supreme Court analyst and professor at Georgetown University Law Center. And while the conservative court has sometimes shown support for broad executive power, he said there's a long-entrenched history rejecting presidential power in this space, in part because it would effectively deprive the legislature of its single most important constitutional power. Just like birthright citizenship, another blockbuster test of conventional legal wisdom that's now on a fast track for Supreme Court review, the Trump administration appears eager to have that fight in front of the nation's highest court. Several nonprofit groups, including the National Council of Nonprofits, also filed suit in federal court in Washington, D.C. on Tuesday. The pause in funding, the group said, will have a devastating impact on hundreds of thousands of grant recipients who depend on the inflow of grant money already obligated and already awarded, to fulfill their missions, pay their employees, pay their rent, and indeed, improve the day-to-day lives of the many people they work so hard to serve. Several states, including New York and California, also sued. Incoming Trump administration officials believe the nation's history with executive spending power is on their side. They also believe that the 1974 Impoundment Control Act, which lays out strict rules for how a president can pause spending, is unconstitutional. That law effectively requires presidents to seek congressional approval before freezing funds that lawmakers have approved. The interruption had sparked outcry from state governments, nonprofits, and lawmakers in the wake of the Trump administration's move to freeze spending across the federal government. After legal challenges were filed against the funding freeze, a federal judge issued a stay temporarily halting the move until she can hear arguments in the case. State Medicaid agencies, federally funded Head Start early education programs, and community health centers had been among those cut off from access to the Payment Management Services web portal, or PMS, run by the Department of Health and Human Services, which handles billions of dollars of payments every year. We have confirmed no payments have been affected. They are still being processed and sent. We expect the portal will be back online shortly. White House Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt said in a post on X, confusion after Medicaid programs locked out tech. There was widespread confusion after Medicaid and other programs discovered they were locked out of the federal health payment system. Spokespeople for HHS and the Centers for Medicare and Medicaid Services have not responded to requests for comment amid the ongoing communications pause imposed by the Trump administration at the department. A spokesperson for the National Association of Medicaid Directors said they had also sought an explanation. My staff has confirmed reports that Medicaid portals are down in all 50 states following last night's federal funding freeze. This is a blatant attempt to rip away healthcare from millions of Americans overnight and will get people killed. Oregon Democratic Sen. Ron Wyden posted on X. Multiple states locked out of Medicaid portal. Senator Brian Schatz, a Democrat from Hawaii, tweeted, "This is a Trump shutdown, except this time it's unlawful." Missouri Republican Senator Josh Hawley said he was assured Medicaid would not be affected. What the White House has told us just now is that Medicaid is not, categorically not, covered by this, Hawley said. In other words, there will be no interruption to Medicaid or Medicare or any grant that floats to individuals. Joanne Alker of the Georgetown University Center for Children and Families had called on the administration to issue a statement clarifying that Medicaid should not be affected after its initial memo ordering the spending freeze late Monday, warning it is a major crisis as states look to draw down funding for the month. Any pause in federal funding of Medicaid, the largest source of federal funding received by states, would be disastrous for states as they need to draw down federal funds to meet their financial obligations to the healthcare providers and health plans serving Medicaid and CHIP beneficiaries, Alker said. Health centers warn of irreversible consequences. That opinion, heavy on pre-colonial history, was written by Justice Clarence Thomas, a leader of the court's conservative wing. By the time of the Constitutional Convention, the principle of legislative supremacy over fiscal matters engendered little debate and created no disagreement, wrote Thomas, joined by Chief Justice John Roberts and 2 other conservatives. It was uncontroversial that the powers to raise and disperse public money would reside in the legislative branch. The most on-point Supreme Court precedent came in 1975. That case, Train v. City of New York, involved President Richard Nixon's effort to block spending Congress intended to upgrade city sewers. A unanimous court ruled that the water pollution law did not give the Nixon administration power to spend less than Congress had appropriated. Mark Paoletta, a conservative attorney who Trump has named to serve as general counsel at the Office of Management and Budget, has countered that the court's opinion in Train was narrowly focused on one specific law, and that it dodged the broader constitutional questions involved about a president's power to pause spending. The Supreme Court has not yet had occasion to squarely confront the substantive impoundment provisions of the ICA or the impoundment authority more generally, Paoletta wrote last year. But Andrew Rudalovich, a professor of government at Bowdoin College, who has closely studied the issue, suggested that the Supreme Court's decision to avoid delving into the deeper constitutional questions in that case likely suggests the justices at the time felt they didn't need to, because it was already settled. There's a lot of reasons to think it will not succeed, should it go in that direction, he said. It's possible, Rudalovich said, that the issue may never reach the High Court. There's considerable uncertainty in how the policy will be implemented. If the Trump administration attempts to submit rescission requests that could be reviewed by Congress under the 1974 law, he said, it might avoid the constitutional confrontation altogether. It's not the most carefully drafted memo, so there's a lot of uncertainty about what's included and what's not, Rudalovich said. There's probably room to retreat and claim victory. White House blames outage for locking out Medicaid, Head Start, health centers from funding site. The White House blamed an outage for locking out a wide range of organizations and agencies on Tuesday from the online systems responsible for drawing down federal health dollars. Multiple state Medicaid programs reported late Tuesday they have been able to resume accessing their payment systems after the nationwide lockout. On a Supreme Court that increasingly looks to history to decide modern controversies, it is an argument that is targeted directly at the court's conservative justices. For 200 years, presidents had the ability to spend less than an appropriation if they could do it for less, and we have seen the extent to which this law has contributed to waste, fraud, and abuse. Trump's pick to lead the Office of Management and Budget, Russell Vought, recently told a Senate committee about the time before the 1974 law was enacted. And Oklahoma Rep. Tom Cole, chairman of the House Appropriations Committee, told CNN's Manu Raju on Tuesday that he doesn't have a problem with the White House decision to pause federal aid. It was a startling reaction because members of congressional spending committees often agree on this much, their own power to wield the purse. I'm not a lawyer. I can't pontificate on what's legal, but I suspect what's happening is what most Republicans would be supportive of, he said. Appropriations is not a law, it's the directive of Congress. The Appropriations Clause of the Constitution gives Congress the power to spend federal money from the Treasury. The top-ranking Democrats on the Senate and House Appropriations Committees fired off a letter to the White House, blasting the memo as a breathtaking, unprecedented move that will have devastating consequences across the country. Will Trump's justices agree? U.S. District Judge Lauren L. Alicant on Tuesday prevented the administration from carrying through with its plans to freeze funding for open awards through Monday evening. Alicant, who was nominated to the bench by Biden, will consider a longer-term pause on the policy early next week. Trump named 3 justices to the Supreme Court during his first term: Neil Gorsuch, Brett Kavanaugh, and Amy Coney Barrett. Sometimes the court's conservatives have aligned with Trump, notably in July, when a 6-3 majority shielded him from prosecution. But it has also twice brushed him aside this month. A narrow majority allowed Trump to be sentenced in his New York hush money case, and the court swatted away Trump's plea to pause the controversial ban on TikTok, allowing that law to take effect and forcing the administration to announce it would not enforce it. On a broad level, the Supreme Court has repeatedly limited attempts by the executive branch to act unilaterally or to use regulations and executive orders to fill in spaces left blank by Congress. In the most significant recent example of that, a 6-3 majority overturned a 1984 precedent that required courts to give deference to federal agencies on how to implement ambiguous provisions of law. Weeks earlier, in an unrelated case involving the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, a 7-2 majority that included both conservative and liberal justices laid out a sweeping view of Congress's power of the purse. Even as the payment systems come back online, those who rely on the grants say they worry that new delays on payments imposed by the Trump administration could inflict permanent damage on stretched thin healthcare systems. The HHS website currently warns that due to executive orders regarding potentially unallowable grant payments, PMS is taking additional measures to process payments. Reviews of applicable programs and payments will result in delays and/or rejections of payments. In a statement ahead of the lockout, HHS announced it would be re-evaluating all programs, regulations, and guidance to ensure federal taxpayer dollars are not being used to pay for or promote elective abortion, following a previous executive order. Even with the best of intentions, these types of funding freezes can do tremendous harm, and could be irreversible to some communities. What we're really talking about is a health center's ability to pay salaries, said Amanda Pierce-Kelly, CEO of the group Advocates for Community Health. The group lobbies on behalf of community health centers, which are subsidized by the federal government to offer healthcare to low-income communities. Pierce-Kelly said that health centers often rely on being able to request money every other week through the system, drawing down their grant to pay bills and make payroll for their staff. Without the money, she warned many health centers facing already slim margins could be forced to trim staff or close their doors. When the system's down and there's no one to talk to understand what they need to do, and then on top of that, there's an uncertain time to the delay, it's paralyzing, said Pierce-Kelly. In a statement, the National Family Planning and Reproductive Health Association warned that health centers could face significant disruption to operations, even with a temporary funding pause. For many patients, Title X-funded health centers serve as their sole source of healthcare. The Title X Family Planning Program is already chronically underfunded, and this executive action risks destabilizing a health provider network that is already operating under immense strain, said Claire Coleman, president and CEO of the association. School lunches, other programs worry about impact. The implications of the federal grant pause go beyond HHS, but the full effects are still unknown. It's unclear whether the National School Lunch Program, which reimburses schools and school districts each month for the meals they serve children, will still receive funding through the U.S. Department of Agriculture if the freeze takes effect. The program feeds about 28 million American school children each month. Diane Pratt-Hevner, Director of Media Relations at the School Nutrition Association, said her organization is asking the USDA for more information. We're urging Congress to increase reimbursements for school meals, given the financial crisis facing meal programs today, So certainly there's just